السلام حياة قد جاء في القرآن أن السلام.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to iTREND on ITV. I'm your host, Zaheerah Bham Ismail. Alhamdulillah, we have had beautiful rains this morning in Johannesburg area. Anywhere that you've been driving or will be driving later, we wish you a very safe journey. Please stay safe on the roads. But we are very, very grateful and blessed to have these rains, and we hope that wherever you are from around the country watching this, that you are also getting some blessed showers in your area. We're always talking about things that are trending at the moment and talking to people who are always stepping ahead and setting the mark and setting the standard for others to follow. Today in my studio with me, I'm so honored to have Tasneem Mohammed from Think SA. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Tasneem, it's such a pleasure to have you on air. You wear so many caps, and one of them being a partner of the innovation hub called Think SA. Tell me what Think SA is about.
Okay, so in essence, Think SA is an innovation management consultancy. We're part of an international group which started in the UK. Think has consultants across the world, and we're the South African representatives.
I'm so impressed that there are Muslim women standing up in the forefront of this and leading the way in terms of innovation hubs that we see building up in South Africa. Is this a trend that you're seeing more and more common?
Yes, when we stumbled across, when we met with Think a good couple of years ago and then embarked on this journey of innovation, it was still a bit new. So everybody uses the word innovation and creativity. At that stage, we were looking for something that's very practical, which helps individuals develop their innovation capabilities and for organizations to start thinking about it more strategically. The trend is going to continue to rise in terms of leadership competencies. About 10 years ago, creativity would have ranked number 9 and innovation out of 10 competencies. By year 2020, it will be number 2 in terms of what organizations will look for in individuals that they hire.
That's fantastic. So that's important for any of our viewers to be aware of, whether they are planning on going into business themselves or already in business, that innovation and creativity, like you said, are ranking so high in terms of competencies. What is number 1 in 2020? I have to ask you that.
Complex problem solving, which is closely linked to creativity anyway.
Yes. We hear innovation and creativity, these buzzwords being thrown around all over the place.
Yes.
What exactly is it in the field that you're in?
Okay, so in essence, innovation is taking a novel or new concept or idea and the process of implementation that unlocks a new value. So it doesn't necessarily have to be what we call disruptive innovation. For instance, your Ubers, which comes in, creates something completely disruptive and changes the way an industry works. It could be what we call an incremental innovation. So tweaking something in your customer service process, changing something in your ingredients that you use, that creates a new and unlocks a new value. So innovation cuts across every area in terms of cost saving, in terms of developing new products or services, in terms of improving processes, systems, your customer experience. It literally underpins everything.
Fantastic. So it's not about, like you said, I love that it's not just about coming in and starting something new. It's about tweaking things that are already working.
Absolutely.
And just keeping it up to date.
Absolutely.
And this is where you come in with your role.
Yes. So in essence, what we do in organizations is to help them develop an innovation strategy. If you look at your most competitive organizations that we would regard as innovative, innovation doesn't just happen by default. There's a specific strategy and processes and systems that they put in place to help develop those type of innovations. Number one, it all boils down to your people. And you can have all the sexy and sophisticated systems and processes, but if people are not developing their best thinking, their best ideas, and if you're not pushing the boundaries in terms of what people are capable of producing from an idea perspective, and if they cannot successfully implement that, unfortunately, innovation falls on its face. So we're literally all about making sure that organizations can develop those strategies, put in place the systems, processes, and develop and continuously motivate their people and develop a culture that's continuously thinking and pushing the boundaries.
Fantastic. Is that only for people who are in big corporate spaces, or are these in individuals who are also in their young entrepreneurial stages?
Absolutely. So about 2 years ago, we were called in to design a business incubator that was going to develop youth entrepreneurs in the green sector. So that was quite an interesting exercise because they were keen on using the innovation and creativity competence to be able to unleash our next generation of entrepreneurs. The reality in the South African system is that unfortunately at a basic education level, even at a higher education level, we don't necessarily develop entrepreneurial and innovation and creative competence.
Yes.
So we utilized our model to literally fast track that competence development amongst these aspiring entrepreneurs, because essentially as an entrepreneur at every single phase of your business, you need to be able to creatively problem solve. You need to be able to change your business model. If something's failing, you've got to quickly put in place another mechanism. So it's a core competence for any successful entrepreneur to have, to be able to continuously, keep your eye on the ball, change things, be a leader, and be able to navigate yourself from tricky and challenging business situations.
But what happens to those businesses that say, this works, why change it? If it works and it's successful, why do we need to change it? We're sticking with what we know. And I see that in many businesses that are generational, where families feel, this has worked for us for 20, 30 years. Why must we all of a sudden decide to change it?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we live in a very complex time where technological innovation is literally changing the way industries work altogether. So a good couple of years ago, I worked in the recruitment industry. At that stage, people would use job boards, like South African job boards, like Career Junction and PNet to post the ads. And then a couple of years later comes LinkedIn, and they completely disrupt that particular industry. And a lot of those organizations literally went bust. So when you live in a digital and technological advanced society, chances of them completely changing the game in certain industries is highly possible. So if you look at something like furniture manufacturing, you could have been doing it for 20 years, and here comes a new technology. We can literally 3D print that same dining room table that has taken an artisan 3 months to actually put together. So you've got to be cognizant that as much as we might not want to change, the technological advancements are changing around us, and that will have a definite impact on our business. That doesn't mean that you need to radically go and invest in expensive systems, but it's about being aware that those changes can take place and to prepare and mitigate for those type of eventualities.
But with technology changing so fast, how are we able to keep ahead of it? Because the moment I feel like, just from a personal perspective, that I've just managed to learn one aspect, there's 2 more steps ahead of it that has already come out. Is that what Think SA does, is almost keeping up with that to inform your client base that this is the new change, this is what you need to be looking at?
Okay, so innovation happens at different levels. Technology is just one component. So for an organization to be truly ahead of the game, they've got to be looking at how they're innovating in terms of their customer experience. How are they innovating in the finance division in terms of their financing mechanisms? How are they innovating in terms of cost-saving structures within the organization? So yes, obviously, being aware of what's happening from a technology perspective is important, but when you're cognizant that you can continuously create a culture that's always doing better in terms of your process and services, you're going to have continuously satisfied customers.
Yes.
They're not going to go away.
Yes.
So it's just about being proactive in your processes, in your approach to customer service, in everything that you do in terms of the new products that you're going to design or services. That's when you're going to, do your investigation in terms of what technology is playing a role in this particular sphere. So you don't have to literally go in now and change everything from a technology perspective. It's about creating a mindset within the organization that can always strive to do better, do new, and do different.
And I like the fact that you've also pointed out that it's not just from the technological aspect, it's from the financial aspect. It's basically in every department.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, it comes down to customer service.
Yes. Yeah.
And what your customer is getting.
Yes, it's all about a mindset, and ultimately in the kind of organizations that we develop innovation strategies in, it's about developing a thinking culture, and that boils down to your frontline reception area in terms of how do you capacitate them or empower them to think about a new way in which they can welcome your guest
Yes.
to the organization. And it's those fundamental, those systems and processes and culture that enables good thinking and good ideas to push forward and be implemented in a relatively short space of time are the ones that we regard as your innovation leaders. So, I mean, you get your Disneys and, your brands like Coca-Cola that are recognized as innovation leaders. And that's purely that it's because they're not just innovating in one particular area of the business. Innovation underpins the entire organizational strategy.
And keeps it going. How easy or how difficult has that been to bring into a South African market? And the reason I ask you this is very often we talk about customer service that we get from certain companies. You see the number of complaints that are there. So that when I do get good service, I rave about it because I think it's phenomenal when somebody replies to your message or is willing to take your order and give it to you before a time or push a little bit ahead. So why are we not used to that being the norm and that being the exception?
Look at from a South African perspective, we do tend to be a bit slower in terms of international adoption. So from a leadership development perspective, the rest of the world have started implementing their innovation strategies a good couple of years ago. We still focused more on coaching and mentorship and leadership development, that type of framework. Innovation is the next curve. So when we came in with Think SA, your engagement is always at a CEO level because generally, internationally, your CEOs are the champions of innovation change in their organizations. And we found ourselves in a situation where South African CEOs were not yet, in that particular space. A lot has happened in the past 2 to 3 years, so it's much easier to have those conversations now, because then what started happening is you'd have these creative idea generation sessions, and CEOs would, call for ideas from people in the organization, and then it usually falls flat. And then the realization that actually innovation is guided by a strategy. So that realization is increasing, which makes our job a little easier as well.
Absolutely.
Yes.
As we're speaking about innovation and creativity with Think SA's partner, innovation partner, Tasneem Mohammed, please stay tuned. When we come back, we'll be exploring different ways that you can enhance your own businesses. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to the show. We are chatting to Tasneem Mohammed from Think SA, the fabulous team that's behind pushing innovation and creativity. Tasneem, you took us through so many concepts now of building this brand, pushing innovation in our businesses, whether you're a CEO of a corporate space or whether you're an entrepreneur. And I love the fact that you said it doesn't have to be big changes in terms of just disrupting environments.
Yes.
It's small changes that we need to be making on a regular basis. You mentioned earlier that in 2020, one of the biggest things that we're going to be seeing, number 2 on competencies, is going to be innovation and creativity. What happens to those that say, actually, I'm not creative, I have no creative skills at all? Can that be developed?
Absolutely. So creativity is a competency that can be developed. It's all about training the brain to think in a different way. So yes, you get people that are naturally creative. It's just that their neural pathways have been formed in that way. And because they deliberately engage in the process of being more creative, they are able to become more creative over time. So it's literally like a muscle that's got to be trained. There are specific tools and techniques that we use to help develop that competency. And the more you practice that, the more naturally creative you become, because it does create new neural pathways in your brain that allows you to then start automatically developing creative ideas.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because in this week I've been thinking about the type of people we sit with and the conversations we have and how that impacts on our neural pathways.
Yes.
Because I was thinking that, certain conversations, if you're consistently around people who are very politically minded, your mindset starts opening up to that and your conversations become more like that. So this is very similar in that line.
Absolutely. And like I said, there's specific tools and techniques. So, you always face that in organizations, and people will say, oh, no, this is not for me. I'm not creative. That's the creative person. Or marketing's creative and I'm not creative. But it's literally because we haven't been given those tools to develop develop that competency, that you actually need to pay more attention to developing it, and the more you practice it. And it's, you know, it's simple. It's going into a shopping mall and using that technique and, you know, pushing yourself in terms of what else could I be thinking about this particular challenge or problem. And it's so important to start developing those competencies in our children as well, because that gives them the added advantage and they don't have to wait so long. And that's, you know, when you're an adult, start now developing your creative competence.
So then I have to ask you, because as a mum as well, you would know this. Many of us have children who are almost in this form of immediate gratification. With everything that they want, it's easy to just purchase it on air. Everything is immediate. The feedback is immediate. How are we able to build or stimulate complex problem solving and innovation and creativity?
A lot has to do with the type of questions you ask your child and developing that curiosity. So when you're taking a drive and you're looking at something, and I do this with my son as well, I'm like, my gosh, this is a problem. How would you fix it? And if you just, you know, you give them the space and the time to think about it, and sometimes you've got to, you know, urge them on as well. You give them you drop a hint and say, okay, now what would you do to solve that particular problem? You'll be amazed at the type of things that they come up with. So from a parental perspective, it's about feeding them with that curiosity, also trying to, you know, get access. The internet has an array of information available. You know, getting access to a few of those tools, start practicing it with them when you walk into a shopping mall or in a restaurant. Like, this is Wimpy. In 20 years' time, what do you think Wimpy would look like? And what kind of, you know, food would they serve their customers? And how could you make it more fun for children? And if you constantly stimulate that type of thinking and get them to deliberately start thinking, it helps. And also, if you see recent research studies, they say one of the best things you can do for your children is give them time to be bored.
I love
so we live in a society where, as you mentioned, it's instant gratification. You're working on my nerves, you know, sit with the iPad or go watch TV or do something. But if I look back at my own childhood, my creative competence was developed in those bored moments where I would literally go pull out my art canvas or pull out my mom's sewing machine and start sewing
and figure
something out. But it's important to give children that dead space where they're literally forced to, you know, find resources to be more creative. So having things available in the house as well, whether it's old magazines that they can get access to, or, you know, recyclable materials, or, you know, empty milk cartons, and giving them a reference in terms of this is what you could potentially create a city out of these. So just drop the hint, but don't be overbearing in terms of this is how you're going to do it. And that's another problem that we face within the schooling system, where you know, the outcomes-based education and these projects, and who takes on the projects? It's the parents. And what happens is you diminish your child's ability to develop creative and you know, complex problem-solving skills because they're not doing it. You're the one initiating the idea. You're the one helping them implement it. And actually, it's those particular areas where you can literally push back. So you give them the resources that they need, but you give them the space to play and develop that competence. So what happens is you find the adults being more creative and looking at that as a creative outlet, but you're diminishing the development those particular skills of your child by taking on their homework and their projects.
You know, you make some very valid points, and these discussions have come up very often. And I think as parents, we need to be okay to allow our children to fail.
Absolutely.
That if there are mistakes, why we're so scared of allowing them to fail and to make those mistakes that we feel, let me just do it. But from what you're saying, for the long run, we're actually taking away a lot of opportunities for them to develop much needed skills.
And actually, we're doing a disadvantage to our children if we do not give them the courage to fail and push forward.
Yes.
Because then what happens if you continuously treat them in this protective environment where you've got to continuously push for the A's in school and you cannot drop your grades and you cannot, and they push for this particular standard, you're literally not giving them the room to actually fail and figure it out on their own. So then they enter the big wide world and they face their first challenge and they completely fumble because we haven't developed their resilience skills. So if you look at entrepreneurial competence as well, the one that stands out in terms of differentiating those that will go on and develop their successful enterprise and those that will fall by the wayside is fear. fear of failure. And your successful entrepreneurs know that failure can happen, but they still choose that option. And that's something that we need to embrace as parents as well.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I think not just as parents, but even us as individuals to be
Yes.
able to say you're willing to take any chance as long as you're willing to do something and put it out there.
Absolutely. And try again. And it's okay to fail, because, it's only through failing that you learn a better way, or you learn another way of doing things. And, if you're Thomas Edison and, your plates didn't fail, we wouldn't have basic things like light bulbs today.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think also just having that support network of having good people around you who believe in your concept. Tasneem, with Think SA and where you are today, where do you see yourself going forward in the current climate that we have? We see a lot of the flux trends mentioning people are not going out anymore. A lot of the things are being done online. People are not heading out into stores. Where do you see it in terms of businesses and being able to still target those markets to come out?
Okay, so in the business sector, there's lots of radical disruptions that's going to change the way business is done. So if you look at your traditional retail stores like your iTREND, we saw Studderfits was a good example of a lack of innovation and what that could do to, such a recognized giant within our country. Again, your retail chains, for instance, so you're moving towards a concept where you're not going to have these chain stores all over the show. You'd have one flagship store, which is a customer experiential store. So you would literally, it would be a museum.
Yes.
So Edcon, for instance, or Edgar's would have this clothing museum, and it would be like an excursion that you go on where you digitally engage with, the brands that they have on offer, but all your transactions will take place digitally and online through those type of networks. So in certain sectors, there's radical innovation that's taking place. For other organizations, it's about just continuously developing that competence amongst your people, because ultimately you can have the most sophisticated systems and processes. If your people are not firstly developed to start creating breakthrough ideas, and if you don't support them in creating a culture that encourages, new thinking and push the boundaries continuously of their thinking, you're always going to be playing catch up instead of pioneering the changes. And that's why, organizations that embrace innovation strategy, they are the pioneers. So you're not continuously, fighting off competitors, because you're literally creating new ways of access to your customers, new ways of satisfying them, new ways of communicating with them. And you're so involved in the process of, implementing incremental improvement across the business, that it secures your customer base and increases it.
And I suppose that's where you are in the forefront of making sure that always stays on track.
Exactly.
With you and Aisha heading up Think SA, this has been in operation for how many years now?
Well, we brought it in about 4 years ago. Wow. At the beginning stages, like I said, the market, at least the market we needed to target, wasn't just ready for a strategic innovation. So we took on lots of innovation projects.
Yes.
So working, for instance, developing that green business incubator, there it was literally the client said, we're stuck, help us. And we literally designed and re-engineered the entire process, helped with implementation, put in place all the systems, the processes to get it to a point where we could say, it's operational, it's functional, it's innovative, and we can now move on to the next thing. So we generally work on a project-by-project basis, and now the conversations are happening at a more strategic level, where we engage in at a CEO level, and they say, come in, help us design our entire innovation strategy.
That's wonderful, and it's good to see South African businesses willing to take that and going forward with it. Where to from here for Think SA?
Well, I'd like to see ourselves playing more in the social innovation space. Our dream is to have the first female and youth innovation hub on the continent that caters purely for women and children and youth, and developing those competencies. So that's something that we're working towards, and that would spearhead developing those innovation competencies and skills, but also unlocking new businesses that are disrupting innovation in our public health system, in our public education system, And yes, that's where we see ourselves playing.
I have no doubt you'll be setting the trend for many, many people to follow. And whether you're a corporate, whether you're an entrepreneur, there's space and access for you to tap into these innovation and creative hubs. Make sure you are at the forefront of it. We often tell many stories of businesses on these shows, but now we've got somebody telling you how to take it to the next level. And I think Tasneem mentioned some vital aspects of us being able to, as parents, to be able to nurture that within our own children and to make sure we give them those opportunities to fail and to nurture problem-solving abilities and to nurture their creativity and innovation. It's time for us to step back and let our children also lead the way. Stay tuned. When we come back, we have another fabulous lady on our show. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back after that ad break. From talking about developing innovation and creativity, we are now chatting to someone who I think speaks to me personally. We are sitting with the very dynamic Heidi Meyer, who is a professional organizer. Heidi, this is something I think as a mother, as a family person, I always think I'm very organized, but I'm constantly going back and repacking and reorganizing and redoing things. And when I came across your page, you look like the perfect organized person. This has to be part of a type A personality.
Absolutely. I think I'm a little bit OCD. I like things in their place. If things are out of place, I get very nervous.
How did you even start up with bringing up a concept of being a professional organizer? You run a company called Cloud9 Organized, and the only thing I can think of is you must be really happy and on Cloud9 once everything is organized.
Absolutely, and I go for it that the clients feel exactly the same way once we are done with their spaces. But I was a teacher for many, many years.
You see, it had to be. It had to be.
And there came a space where I decided I need to be out of teaching and I need to start my own thing. And looking through all kinds of different opportunities, I am very good with my hands. Love crafts, thinking of doing DIY crafty kind of things. And then looking at different opportunities, eventually I stumbled upon a lady in Cape Town who had started organizing, Tracy Folks from Get Organized. And I phoned her immediately because I realized this is what I would love to do. And went to the first workshop and it just started off from there.
And you knew you found your calling.
Absolutely, yes.
When we talk about being organized, very often many of us think it's about just putting things in a neat place. But there's a lot more to it. There's a lot. When I watched your pages, there's a very systematic approach to being able to go back and find what you need. Because someone like me sits and I know I put things around, and then when I need it, I just have to still remember what I've done with what I needed and where it is.
Yes, and absolutely. And when you have put a system into place, you need to trust your system. And if it doesn't work, then you change it. But if it works, you keep it that way.
And this is not only just for corporates. This is for people at home. This is for families, for individuals. Are you focused just on corporates, or is it all around?
It's all around. Anything from a garage, shed, warehouses. I even did a job at SABC organizing the costume room or giving advice on doing so. So it is really anything.
So this is something that's been ingrained in you, because you mentioned that you were a teacher, so I have no doubt your classroom looked like perfection. What are the top tips when it comes to being an organized person?
I think it is very important that you know where you put things, that they are easily accessible, that they are in a space where you will use them, not too far away. So in organizing, we talk about zoning. Mm-hmm. So in the kitchen, it's very easy to do because you have your space where you make your coffee. Yes. You'll have your space where you cook, where you prepare your food. So you zone that. But many people don't have that ingrained in them. Mm-hmm. So you find that the coffee cups are on the opposite side in the kitchen instead of where they would actually use them. So it is very important to zone your areas where you work, have the stuff easily accessible that you need, where you need it, and of course saving time by being organized.
Absolutely. And you talk about the zoning, and I think many of us in our kitchens know how that works, but we seldom take that out and use it in other spaces where we have to be zoned according to what we need.
Absolutely. And I love Julie Morgenstern from the USA. She's a fantastic organizes for Oprah Winfrey, and I was very fortunate to actually meet her when she was in South Africa. And I love the way she says, is we start in nursery school, where everything is labeled,
Yes.
and you know exactly where things are. Children do a task, they finish with a task, and they put the stuff away where it belongs.
Yes.
And when they come home, we disrupt that whole discipline. And instead of inculcating this in our whole life, we sort of drop it somewhere along the line. So things need to be in their spaces, labeled. Everybody
Yes.
needs to know where they are. When we do a task, we need to finish that task and be done with it.
Absolutely. What about, I love how you're saying that even at home, we need to continue with this habit of making sure things are organized. I have to ask you, in keeping with what we said earlier, this doesn't take away from the creativity of the child at all. This is just making sure things are neat and orderly.
Absolutely. And I think very often it allows them to be more creative. Because say, for instance, they love drawing, but there are pens and pencils all over the show. Nothing is organized. They want to draw something. They can't find the paper. So it becomes very, very difficult
Yes.
for them to be creative. But if they know the paper is in that spot, there are my waxies, there are my other kinds of pencils or whatever, the paints, then it's much more easier and more fun. But one thing is this discipline of packing up after you are done. And many people don't do that.
Absolutely.
The dishes are left at the TV at night, and you get into the house in the morning and the whole living room looks like a disaster has struck it. So one actually needs to teach the child, or even the parents in the
Yes.
house, at the end when you have had your dinner, take your plates back to the kitchen. It just makes life so much easier. And in the morning when you walk into the living room, it's a living room. It's not a disaster
My mother
area.
is watching you going, you see, I've told them this for years. No one listens to me. That's my mother's listening to this and saying that's exactly it.
No.
So there's wisdom in listening to our parents without a doubt.
Yes.
When it comes to, let's take, for example, our personal studies and our own spaces, I often find that very often with many of us who are working, but who've also got our family lives to coordinate, things are all over the show. How do we find that balance? And the reason why I'm asking you this is because when I was training to be a therapist, our one therapist said to us, who was teaching us, said, a sign of a room is a sign of your mind. If it's disorganized, it means your mind is disorganized. Does that hold the same for you?
Yes, for me, but Einstein didn't believe that.
Absolutely.
He said if the desk is tidy, it doesn't show that you are busy. But I do not believe that. I believe that if it's tidy, you actually get more done.
So tell me how we organize our study spaces as mums, as family members. What are the things that we need to be looking out for in terms of saying what are the 5 tips we need? Because I come in, I've got my girl schedules to organize, I've got my own times to organize, my workloads, and it's in various different fields. How do we even start with putting all of that together?
I think it is so important that one has one diary.
Yes.
To start off with, instead of having your written diary and your cell phone and heaven knows what else. So stick to one diary, first of all. As papers come in, deal with them. And especially when it comes to children's school schedules and things like that, I love having a drop zone for the kids where you have perhaps a little in tray where as they come into the house, they put the info from school in there, that when you get home, you can pick it up from there. For yourself, have a place where you put your handbag when you come in. If you have work that you bring home, that needs to go straight to the study and not sit on the dining room table or on the kitchen counter. So those things need to go back to where they belong. And mail, lots of us still get mail. And I find piles and piles of mail sitting on tabletops in the kitchen everywhere. And instead of just opening it and deciding about it immediately, what are you going to do with this? Can I toss it? Do I keep it? Do I file it? So I like using the FAT system. So you file, action, and toss.
I like that.
But in action, you actually have different actions that you do, things that you have to do, things that you have to pay, and then eventually which you have to file. So I like setting up a little buddy drawer, and in them, as the mail comes in, you open it, you toss the envelope because that immediately is gone with 2/3 of the paper, and then you slot them into where they need to be. So your actions, but make sure that the actions are actually diarized, otherwise they might get lost. And also tickets can go into your action drawer.
Yes.
When you have a show that you want to attend or whatever, can go in there, then at least you can find them again.
And you know exactly where you've left them.
Absolutely, yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so that system works very well. And then, of course, once in a month, if you run a small business, a lot of people do not look after their papers. But if you do this, and once a month you consolidate your statements and your bank accounts, and then you file everything. So instead of trying and doing it every day, you do it once.
And that also gives you a more organized and systematic way of just dealing with things, because I'm listening to you speaking and I'm thinking, wow, those are simple, easy tips that just makes us feel more organized and more in control of what we're doing.
That is exactly what it is. And many people think organizing is such a drab, boring thing to do. And actually when you have the system in place, and I find so many of my clients, when they have the system and it works for them, it's just, you know, such a relief.
Absolutely.
And they can actually get more done by being organized. And instead of looking for the keys, they actually hang on the key hook. You know?
Simple things, simple exercises to make our lives a lot more easier, a lot more organized, and a lot more systematic, so that we can indulge in creativity and exploring other aspects. We'll be taking a very quick ad break. When we come back, we'll continue the organized conversation. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back after that ad break. We are chatting to the dynamic Heidi Meyer about being organized. She runs a phenomenal company called Cloud9 Organize, and just listening to her tips and her ideas about how we can simplify and organize our lives within a home environment makes me realize there's so much I need to rethink about my space at home and make it a little bit more functional. Heidi, one of the things that we spoke about was family homes, and we don't realize to what extent we need the help in organizing our family homes, because it's a space we live in all the time. It's a space we're always around. But as you said, if we're not putting things in the right places, we're never going to find what we need.
Yes, that is true. And also, I find a big obstacle in my business is that people think I'll do it myself. I can do this myself and I will do it. And I will do it as soon as I get time to.
Absolutely.
But they never get the time to. And then it just becomes a nightmare. And instead of trusting somebody else to come in, you know, people get in plumbers if the toilet is blocked. But if the whole flow of your house is blocked, you don't get anybody, because I'll sort it myself.
And we never get down to doing it.
Absolutely. And it's so easy. Just pick up the phone, call a professional organizer and get it done.
Tell me about clothing. One of the pictures we've got up is us organizing our clothing spaces. How easy or how difficult is that to do?
Actually, very easy. If one does that seasonally, and you know what you have worn that season, you know that's the stuff that you love, and you actually just wear 20% of what is in your cupboard in any case.
Always the case.
And it is actually frightening to see the amount of clothing that people have, and thinking there are so many people out there that have nothing.
Yes.
And just thinking of, you know, you could donate 80% of your clothing to people that don't have, and make a huge difference to our country as a whole.
So what you're saying is seasonally we should go through our wardrobes, sort out whatever we haven't worn, take it out. As a rule of thumb, if we haven't worn it that season, we're taking it out.
Absolutely. So I would say 2/3 down from what you're wearing in your t-shirts, those can go because you never wore them.
And you see there are many people who are watching this saying, no, but one day I'll wear it. One day I'll fit into it.
I'll fit into it again, I promise you. I actually had a husband who said, everything below 14 needs to go. She can't wear that anymore.
I like that. When it comes to our garage spaces, we're talking about the home environments. Many of us see our garage spaces as a dumping ground for everything else that we can't find space for. So bicycles will go in there, or any tools that we're not sure of. How do we even start organizing that? Because I've driven into garages where you can barely find space to park your car.
Absolutely, and many garages are exactly that. It's a dumping ground. It's not there anymore for the car to park.
Yes.
So I walk in and it's just chaos. Anything from old appliances that are not used anymore to clothes that people don't wear anymore. And instead of actually donating it, giving it away, giving it to people that can use it, they dump it there. So I just start on one end, pray,
I like pray has to
work
be there.
from the top down and across the room. That's the only way you can do it. And then physically toss. And you won't believe how many empty cardboard boxes, plastic bags, empty plastic bottles lie in garages, which are actually put there, and very often by domestics that don't know what must I do with this. Madam says I must keep the plastic bottles because they need to go to the nursery school. But then they end up somewhere in a big hole and it's never being found again.
That's it.
But the most brilliant thing is to walk into that garage at the end of the day, or the client comes in and he says, oh my gosh, I've got place for my car again.
And I actually have all of this I didn't know I had. Yeah. How, with the families that you've worked with or clients that you work with, how easy is it to let go of things that we seem to hold on to? Because very often I know in my home, I'm thinking, I'll say, oh, but this is sentimental value. This year I'd like to hold on to because one day I'll need it, or this will remind me of that. Is it very easy to let go, or do you actually say to everyone, you leave the house and I'll sort it out?
No, I don't say you leave the house, I'll sort it out. That happens in the American shows, and it's actually scary. And for me, it is almost, you are taking away what inherently makes the person who they are. So I love working with my client. They need to decide, is it sentimental, isn't it? If it is, we have a little memory box and they may put it there, but the memory box is a small box. It's not a big box.
It's not a massive one.
And they need to check it every year to see whether what's in there is still current, whether they really still need it, whether it's still emotional. Is it an old card from an old boyfriend which actually can go?
Yes.
You know, so one needs to be ruthless about those things and limit yourself to the space. But limiting yourself to a space in everything that you do in your home, you have only that space, so I can only fill that space. But coming back to the sentimental thing, it is so often that people don't want to let go of things because they say, my auntie gave this to me, or my grandmother gave it to me. It's no use being stuck in a drawer somewhere. You need to actually display it, use it, love it, show them that you love it. If you hate it, please re-gift it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And my friends actually laugh about this because they know Heidi re-gifts. And the worst thing ever was I had a birthday, so I was given a gift bag with a gift. And that afternoon I went to visit a friend of mine, took the same bag, but of course with a different gift. And I arrived there and the people who had gifted me looked at this bag like, oh my God, he's regifting our gift. And I had to make my friend unpack that gift.
So they knew.
So they knew. Yeah.
Then let me ask you, because you seem to be the Martha Stewart of home environments, what are the rules on regifting? Are we allowed to be regifting instead of cluttering our homes with all these things?
I think it is fine. I really think it's fine. If you feel you're going to hurt somebody's feelings, I actually have come to the point where I say to my friends, listen guys, I need stuff for my garden. Can you please rather give me the money than go and buy me a little garden gnome or something in that line? So they know exactly beforehand, you know, this is what she would love. Rather gift, instead of things, give an opportunity to do something, a show, a picnic, a whatever, something that's fun.
Something that they can hold on to.
Absolutely. And also remember it.
Yes.
It's a memory.
Yes, without a doubt. What has been one of the biggest challenges you've encountered through your experience with being organized?
I think the biggest challenge sometimes is walking into a room and you are faced with clutter. And you don't want to be judgmental and say to the people, how on earth did you actually make this happen? It looks, you know, you can't tell them that. So it's a challenge every day when you walk into a space and you say, I don't know how to deal with this, but you do. And you just get through it. And it's physically just taking one thing at a time, making that decision and finding a new home for it.
toy rooms are a huge challenge for many families because we keep saying, I have a lot of friends who say, but my kids are so young, every time I put it away, it's back out again. It's just pointless cleaning this. How do we go about organizing playrooms to still enable the creativity, to still enable the imaginative play? As a teacher, you know that part very well, but to also just make sure things are neatly accessible.
Toy rooms are actually a problem because people just give many toys.
Yes.
And instead of giving quality, they sometimes just give you cheap stuff that just gathers dust eventually or breaks immediately once children start playing with it. So children's rooms, I love having everything in containers, but in small enough containers that a child can actually lift it down, play with it. It needs to be labeled. When the child is still too small, I like putting up pictures that they can see. This is the Lego, or these are my Barbies, these are the Barbies, Barbie clothes. I mean, for a child to play creatively, they need to know where is the stuff. It's no use having one large bin filled with everything and the broken items. So the whole creativity goes by...
It's just lost.
By the way, yeah. Because they can't find what they actually want to play with. So if you have a structure in your playroom and you have different containers, everything neatly labeled, and a child is taught that they actually have, when they're finished again with the play, with that specific item, they need to put it away. And I find au pairs need to be shown that as well and taught that as well, because it's a discipline and a routine that the child needs to learn.
Absolutely. And I think very many of us are in this concept of, oh, somebody else will pick it up. And we don't teach our kids the skills of being able to look after themselves.
Absolutely. And I think I was very fortunate there. I lived in a hostel for many, many years. I went to hostel in grade 1 and I stayed in hostel until I finished school. And there's nobody to pick up after you. You have to be so organized. I mean, when I packed my bags, for instance, I knew if I don't take this, then I'll go without it for a week.
Yes.
So if you don't have your shoes, tough luck. Mom and dad are not going to drive to school to bring it to you.
That's it.
So it is this whole thing of we are actually creating a situation where children can do what they want, where adults do what they want, and there's nobody actually setting the model. They are not the role model anymore for the children to say, oh, mommy is so organized, I need to be, and I love things organized. And I laugh sometimes because I go into clients' home and I tweak, for instance, the cupboard, toy cupboard. And when the kids come home, they say, oh, Auntie Heidi was here again. But also the domestics. I mean, if they are not taught what to do, they don't know what to do. They don't necessarily know about certain kinds of toys. People get upset with electronic toys being destroyed because they're tossed into a big bag or something. But if they are not taught, listen, Mary, this thing is now very expensive, it's electronic, it needs to be treated this way, and we need to put it in a certain place. Mary won't know.
I think we need those lessons for ourselves as well, because very often our kids throw everything around without even realizing what things need to be put in what places. What are your top tips for organizing for families that they need to know?
That is difficult. I think, first of all, time management is a very important thing. Do things the night before instead of rushing through it the next morning. Be calm in the mornings. So try and do as much as you can the evening before. Make sure that the lunch bags are packed, that the school bags are ready, that the kids know which activities they do the next day. And you as a person yourself, if you're a professional person, that you are out of the house in time. You need to plan the day before that you will be out of the house in time, and that everything is ready for you. I mean, setting out your wardrobe the evening before, knowing exactly what you're going to wear the next morning, and actually focusing on just getting dressed, not faffing around, is this now the right thing for today?
Absolutely.
And having everything available that when you need to leave the house, that it's there, and having everything in its place and a place for everything, to me, is a big thing. To actually finish the jobs that you're busy with, packing away after that is also very important.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I don't know, there's so much.
Thank you so much for being on the show with us and for sharing so many insightful tips, things that we can literally put into place immediately. And I have no doubt I'll be following you on your Facebook page to continue seeing more tips and what else we can do to being more organized.
Thank you so much for having me. It really was a big privilege.
We've had some fabulous ladies today on our show talking to us about creativity, innovation, organizing, and taking ourselves not just from cost savings, but from time savings. And those are things that we need to adhere to. To all the teachers out there, have a fabulous Teachers' Day. I know it is a national day for teachers, and we do hope you understand how much we value and appreciate the service that you do provide to each of us out there, not just the learners, but I think we find teachers all along our life's journey. So thank you for being amazing teachers. Thank you for joining us on air today. We look forward to seeing you same time, same place next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ah